Number 15. The second floor. When you are given a house, sometimes there are strings attached. I Count Fish was staying in his boss's big house while he was out of state. He thought it was a super good deal, although the first few months were ghost-free. After that, the employee started hearing bangs and bumps and distinct footsteps from the second floor. When he went to investigate, he found the door of a walk-in closet in an unfinished room open, so he shut and locked it. But a couple nights later, he heard footsteps again and he found the door reopened. It wouldn't stay closed or locked, so he pushed a bed up against it to keep it shut. The door stayed closed thereafter, but that wasn't the end to the noises. He always heard footsteps and thumps throughout the house. Another employee moved into the home after he left, and that employee only lasted a month. He said that he heard huge slamming noises, like a stack of heavy books dropped right outside his door while shaving. Then he heard someone racing down the hallway. I cannot explain how horrifying it is to hear little taps from outside of a bathroom door, Fish writes. Maybe you can explain, but that description is horrifying enough. Number 14. The shadows. There's nothing scarier than a spirit blanketed in shadows. The house Denholm lived in with his dad was an enormous 5-floor terrace 19th century home. Voices and footsteps were often heard throughout the home. Redditor Denholm 2 was just 9 or 10 years old when he woke up in the middle of the night to find a huge 7-foot shadow-like figure standing and watching him at the foot of his bed. When the figure noticed me, the door to my room slammed shut, Denholm writes. Sleep paralysis or paranormal, what do you think? My guess is paranormal based on the door slam. Number 13. The maid and the stableman. When the owners of an old home back out on a promise, the ghosts of those who were deceived are bound to haunt the place. That's what happened to the occupants of a New York home owned by Redditor Twig Snapper's uncle. The house was owned in the 1800s by a family who had promised to give it to a stableman. Instead, the family sold it, and when the stableman passed, he and the maid who worked in the home never left. Although the uncle often heard things in the house, they'd just laugh it off, chalking the haunting up to legend. But one night when a friend of his uncle stayed over at the house, the friend saw a maid carrying towels downstairs one night when she awoke. Later, she saw the maid again. The friend assumed his uncle had hired staff, as he could afford it, so she simply went to sleep. But when she woke up, she asked his uncle where the maid was, thinking that perhaps she was cooking breakfast. After asking what the maid looked like, and receiving the woman's description, he took her into the living room and showed her an old picture. The friend said that yes, this was the woman she saw. In response, Twig Snapper's uncle replied, yeah, she has been passed away for about 100 years. Straight out of a horror movie, this one. Number 12. My new house. What if you got blamed for a spirit's destruction? That's what happened to Rennie 115 when he and his family moved into a haunted house. The first oddity happened within a week of moving in. Rennie's room had a leak, despite the fact that a storage space was located above him and it had no pipes. The second creepy thing to happen was a scratching noise from his parents' floor, coming from the storage space. When he peered in, he saw nothing, but it felt much colder than the rest of the home. And lastly, later that night, Rennie's parents arrived home after he'd fallen asleep. They woke him up angrily, blaming him for destroying the room. When he finally woke up properly, he was freaking out because the room was indeed a wreck. Things were thrown everywhere, and the furniture had been moved around. Rennie writes, we now have a dog and he seems really afraid of my parents' room. Does anyone have any theories? Number 11. Loftus Hall. When Redditor Decaring Eggs entered the famously haunted Loftus Hall in Wexford, Ireland, she expected to encounter the paranormal, but she probably didn't expect this. Some history on the home. In 1666, a family lived in Loftus Hall when, on a stormy night, a man knocked on their door. Being a handsome gentleman, he was invited in for some cards and drinks. The eldest daughter of the home quickly fell in love with the man, but as they were playing cards, one fell below the table. When she went to retrieve it, she was startled to find the man had cloven hooves. She screamed and the handsome stranger jumped through the roof, a hole forever thereafter remaining. After this visit, the hall was haunted. Anything holy in the house was destroyed, including statues and paintings in the house's chapel. A red face is said to appear in one of them. And what of the daughter? She started to go insane, and so she was locked in a room until she passed away, a room which she now haunts. At the age of 17, this Redditor visited the hall. While in the very same room, she had quite the encounter. The Redditor writes, "While the tour guide was talking, I felt a cold hand slide along my neck and move my hair, thinking it was her stepmom. She turned to look. Her stepmom's hands were safely in her pockets, and none of her group was near enough to have touched her. For me, that'd be enough to run out of that house and never ever return again." Number 10. Voices. Old houses are full of history, some of it terrifying. Redditor's suspicious palm trees house is one of them. Built in the 19th century, the house has withstood 2 sons of the previous owner who took his life. It would be strange if it wasn't haunted. The animals seem to know there's something going on. When palm trees, pet dog, and parrots awake, they follow something invisible around with their heads. There are cold spots throughout the home, and Palm Tree's brother would hear voices in his room. Palm Tree writes, "There's also a whole floor we don't use, and I sleep in the attic. I pass through that floor to get to my attic, where I have a motion-activated light there. It would switch on in the middle of the night while nobody was there. Motion activation with no one there to activate it. Nothing more horrid. I wonder if he got more motion-activated lights. Which other places in the house would they be triggered by this ghost?" Number 9. Old lady perfume. Some people's college experience is a little different than others. Redditor Munches shared an old haunted house with some college roommates. He writes, "Things got so weird that everyone moved out except for me and one roommate. One of the weird things, a door slamming repeatedly at 3 in the morning. When he yelled at his roommate to stop slamming it, he remembered he was alone in the house, but the slamming stopped when he screamed, only to be replaced by his hippie beats swaying aggressively against his door frame for a half hour." He writes, "I debated if I should jump out the window, but I laid in bed till it stopped." On another occasion, again at 3 a.m., again alone in the home, the Nintendo started playing extremely loudly on the back porch, waking him from a deep sleep. When he went to investigate, the music grew louder as he approached, but when he opened the door, it was gone. Silence. Only the scent of floral old lady perfume, which was there whenever something creepy happened. This old lady ghost must have been a fan of practical jokes. Number 8. Whatever is up there. When you hear an unusual noise in your attic, you never know what is up there. Headbanger Girl says that creepy and unexplainable things often happen in her family's house. The most recent incident occurred when she was working in her office. Upstairs, she heard noises, and she just figured it was the cat playing. But then it sounded like stuff was being thrown around or knocked over in her daughter's bedroom. Ignoring the sound, still thinking it was one of the cats, Headbanger went to get her phone in her bedroom. That's when she realized both of her cats and her dog were downstairs, not upstairs. So what in the world was making all that racket? To answer your question, Headbanger writes, "No, I did not go look for whatever is up there. It can stay up there." She also states that she's not the only one who has heard whatever is up there. Her mother, daughter, and brother have as well. Whatever is up there paces around and goes up and down the stairs. Sounds like something very creepy resides in that attic. Number 7. The Crying Girl. If you come across a creepy house on McKean Street in South Philadelphia, do not enter. Redditor Jins and Anders 84 shares his story about a haunted house there owned by his grandfather. He claims that the house is haunted from top to bottom, from the 3rd floor to the basement, and it's haunted with many spirits, some of whom fill the home's occupants with loneliness, grief, and despair, others of whom fill the occupants with anger. For a while, the entire 3rd floor of the house belonged to Anders. Sounds great, but just don't stand at the home's front windows on that 3rd floor, because you'll feel someone try to push you from there. Anders said that he was told by a neighbor about a past incident where a man took his own life in the house by jumping from the 3rd-story window. On the 2nd and 1st floors, there are other happenings, one of which involves a man who had moved into the house before his grandfather bought it. While climbing the stairs, the man passed away when his heart failed, so sometimes around midnight to 3 a.m., creaking on the stairs can be heard, along with the man's ring sliding up the banister. Both Anders and his mother have seen the man's figure on more than one occasion in the stairwell and the halls, but of all the floors, the basement is the creepiest. One small cellar room is particularly haunted. As a child, Anders heard a little girl crying down there in the distance on occasion. While playing with his Tonka trucks down there one day, the truck began to roll on its own accord to the end of the room, the end where this small haunted room stood in the darkness. Then he heard the girl's cries and saw the silhouetted figure of a child without feet gliding towards him. As Anders raced away and up the stairs, his Tonka truck was chucked at his back, missing him by mere inches. Anders writes, "I never went back into the basement ever again. After a bizarre incident like that, I can't say I blame him." Number 6. Doppelgangers. One of the creepiest on this list was submitted by Redditor 1LT Obvious. "I lived in a house that was seemed to be haunted by doppelgangers," he writes. He then goes on to explain, "Every event that happened involved a known person being in a place where they should not have been. In one instance, Obvious was IMing with his girlfriend with the webcam turned on. He saw his younger sister in the webcam pass his room to head upstairs to bed, but he didn't notice her footsteps on the stairs. This was strange as the house was an old Victorian and made a lot of noise. He went to check the living room and his sister was lying right there on the couch. What's more, when he asked his girlfriend if she'd seen something on the webcam, she said she'd seen his sister head upstairs. On another occasion, Obvious and his mom were waiting in the car for his sister, and when she came out, she looked at him oddly. Apparently, she'd called out to him when in the house to tell him that they were leaving soon, and he, or someone who sounded exactly like him, yelled down to her that he'd be there in a minute. Obvious's mom also experienced the doppelgangers. While she slept, someone woke her by tapping her foot. That someone looked an awful lot like Obvious. He was standing at the bottom of her bed and after a few seconds faded out. These are just a few of Obvious's stories about the strange doppelganger happenings in his home. Here's hoping these doubles disappeared. Number 5. The Man in the Mirror. Jen Vixen's haunted house in Golden, Colorado will keep you up at night. After moving across the country with her boyfriend, Jen felt exhilarated about living in a new home in a big city, but soon that exhilaration turned to fear. The first encounter with the paranormal happened when she was waiting on her coffee machine too warm. She heard someone come up behind her, and as her boyfriend left early in the day, she thought it was his sister, who lived on the upper level of the split home. But when she turned around, no one was there. In fact, no one was home at all. After keeping this incident to herself for a while, Jen's boyfriend's sister mentioned that her 6-year-old daughter was spooked by the home. The daughter claimed that she saw a man in the mirror at the end of the hallway at times. The man wore a strange hat, probably from another century. After several months had passed, more paranormal activity occurred. She often felt like she was being watched, and on one occasion while bathing upstairs, she heard footsteps outside and saw a shadow pass beneath the door. When she got out, no one was there. On one occasion, they found more than 20 black snakes in a tangle outside their backyard. She also felt a heaviness while in bed, as if dozens of spirits stood around them. I will never forget that feeling, Jen writes. The entire place had a bad energy. It's lucky they got out alive. Number 4. 1705 Elder Avenue. When you live in an old mansion with butler's stairs, things are bound to get spooky. Redditor Avery Jane writes of her old country house of 1705 Elder Ave, outside the town of Nichols. The enormous 3-bedroom house had butler's stairs leading to the kitchen, as well as an elegant curved staircase perfect for sliding down. Even though the house was charming, odd events would occur, making their new home a bit more creepy than charming. Jane's brother had a doll that would move around the home, turning up in odd places like in the hallway or on a step. Although the kids told their parents, they chalked it up to the wild imaginations of children. In the summer, when it was well over 90 degrees, they'd come across cold spots in the home. When Jane was moved to the room above the kitchen, she could hear someone going up and down the butler's stairs at night. They even saw a girl on the stairway. But these incidents pale in comparison to what happened to Jane. Nearly a year after they'd moved in, a girl ghost would appear. Jane would be alerted to her apparition by the cats, which would begin to hiss. Then the girl's voice. In these appearances, Ghost Girl would make fun of her, telling Jane that her family hated her and she should take her own life. Girl Ghost also said that she'd taken the life of her cat, which she did one weekend when the family went camping. The cat was discovered passed away under her bed. Another of her cats was her protector. Whenever Jane was alone in the home and feared the girl, she'd go to the basement, and the cat would sit on the top steps to guard her from the spirit. After moving out of the house in the 8th or 9th grade, Jane was no longer depressed. Whoever leased the farmhouse ended up knocking down every building on the property. Jane writes, "All that's left is one large tree and the concrete foundation. That's probably a good thing." Number 3. The Presence. After his parents moved him overseas to the UK as a child, Redditor Nay75 lived in an old rundown house with lead pipes that was in the process of being remodeled, but really it probably should have been demolished. Nay says that at night bright lights would appear in corners of various rooms in the house, and he heard footsteps across the floorboards, despite the fact that the house was carpeted. Being only 6 years old, Nay was terrified about what went on in his home. He remembers being awakened at night by a little girl ghost who would dance on the chest of drawers. Whenever he'd tell his mother, she'd say he'd been dreaming, but it wasn't just baby Nay who was seeing things. The workmen doing construction on the house said they'd felt as though they were being watched, and tools kept moving around in the house. What's more, as a friend of Nay's eldest sister spent the night and woke up screaming. The little girl ghost had visited her, pulling her out of the bed. This friend vowed to never return to their house. They discovered the young girl had passed away of asthma in the house, so perhaps this was their midnight visitor. After the incident, Nay's mom thought they should probably seek advice about this. One man suggested Nay's family behave as though the entities were welcome and part of the family. Nay writes, "When we got home, we'd shout, 'Hi, we're home.' Over time, the house settled and we didn't get any more trouble." Perhaps good advice for some others on this list. Number 2. Paranormal activity. Whether you're searching out haunted houses in your spare time, or your house itself is haunted, this entry is for you. Redditor Halfsleeve is of the latter category. Over the course of 3.5 years in his home, he's crossed paths with the paranormal on more than one occasion. Being a skeptic, he doesn't want to ascribe the encounters to paranormal activity, but he admits they're unexplainable. Some examples of this activity On one occasion, out of the corner of his eye, he saw his daughter pass by while he was working on his motorcycle, but after calling out her name to no avail, he later discovered that she hadn't been home all day. On another occasion, the blankets were torn off him in the middle of the night. One of the most terrifying instances in the haunted house happened when Half-Sleeve's 15-year-old son raced to tell his father that he heard his brother calling out his name, only to realize his brother wasn't home. That same night, the blinds were banging, there were footsteps pounding on the doors, handles turning. Half-Sleeve and his 2 children all heard the sounds, which always seemed to come in threes. Then for around 18 months, for whatever reason, the haunting ceased. That is until November 19th, 2018. At 10 o'clock at night, the Ring doorbell chime activated, as if it had picked up movement. However, there was no one at the door, nor had the sensor light gone on. It wasn't a windy night, so it couldn't have been activated by such motion. Even worse, the night before Half-Sleeve posted on Reddit, his daughter was watching Netflix in her locked room when something opened her door and footsteps walked down the hall. Later, Half-Sleeve's partner came by when a shadow appeared at the front door, and a moment later, and a flash of light appeared in Half-Sleeve's room. Half-Sleeve writes, "I checked the recording on the Ring app and noticed something strange. The image is of a misty figure left of the camera that looks both like a skull and a woman, becoming clearer as it moves. A man's face comes into view, as well as a sword or a cane. This figure vanishes when the flash of light bolts from inside the house. Don't know if this helps, but my advice is to move as quick as possible." Before we get to number 1, my name is Chills and I hope you're enjoying my narration. If you're curious about what I look like in real life, then go to my Instagram at DylanIsChillinYT and tap that follow button to find out. It's a proven fact that generosity makes you a happier person, so if you're generous enough to hit that subscribe button and the bell beside it, then thank you. This way, you'll be notified of the new video we upload every Tuesday. Number 1, Sounds in the Attic. A 17th century house probably has a ton of character. Dr. Phillies maybe had too much. One more thing, 3 multiple life takings occurred in the home. With such history, you'd expect some strange stuff, and you'd certainly get it. Shadows, strange noises, sleepwalking, creaking doors that opened and closed on their own. Philly ascribed all this to a child's imagination, but one incident Philly couldn't explain away. While his parents were away on business, he and his siblings were staying at their friends' houses for the time, but Philly forgot his hockey gear at home, so he and his friend went to get it. When they were in the house, they heard footsteps in the attic. Thinking one of his siblings was home, he shouted upstairs and the footsteps stopped. But then they started coming down the old creaky stairs, slowly. Although Philly felt a weight there, he saw nothing, but his friend had a nervous breakdown once they got outside, because he claimed to have seen some scary form that looked alien to him. I credit it all to the creepiness of the house, Philly writes, but that one night with my friends still gives me the chills. You're not alone, Philly. Thanks for checking out this video. Be sure to subscribe because we upload new countdowns every Tuesday and Saturday. Or if you're still not convinced, here are some of our other videos that I think you'd like. Enjoy!